It is always a great delight to welcome Sharron Davies, our former Olympic swimmer, to the show. She will be joined by the Director of Sport Fair Play for Women in Fiona McInerney, and also by Caroline Downey, who is education reporter at the National Review, and will be very much part of this next hour. First of all, Sharron, Happy New Year to you, and it's good to see you.
Aww,
and I know we're well into February, but what's important for me is how far we've got after some of the things that happened towards the end of 2023, and where do we need to go next to continue to police governing bodies that I never totally trust.
Yeah, absolutely. So the place that we're in is really an awful lot different than it was sort of 6 months ago. We've got big sports like track and field, aquatics, rowing in the UK, although not in the World Federation. British triathlon have been really good. Volleyball, obviously rugby started off both union and league. They were the very first in the world to actually do a very in-depth study and to say that it was, an increased risk to have males actually playing rugby against females. But we still got 60 sports in the UK, including 6 combat sports, would you believe? That's fighting sports that allow males to self-ID, to actually fight females. So the science hasn't changed. 18 studies out there. One which, one of the last ones was published in the British Medical Journal after 14 years, showing that the reduction by taking, hormones, cross-sex hormones, made practically no difference whatsoever. So the difference on average is about 20% between male and female performance, anything between 10 and 30 at Olympic sports. So the more explosive a sport is, the bigger the advantage. And what is quite new is that since January, we've had 2 very big reports out, one of which Fiona will tell you a lot more about because it was a Fair Play for Women report, but showing that this is impacting participation by young girls and women in sport. So men's sport has returned to the levels pre-COVID. Women's sport still has not. And we have got lots of testimony now from women across 35 different sports showing that parents are removing their children from contact sports like football, where they worry that they're going to get injured, and it will be injury that will stop them from participating in those sports going forward. So if ever they think there's a male on the opposition, they will withdraw their daughters. And also we've got girls that are giving up because we've got testimony, for example, from a 13-year-old girl who was a goalkeeper, and she lost her place to a boy who just identifies, right? These aren't children that are doing anything with their testosterone levels whatsoever. They're just going, today I feel like a girl. And they are losing their position on girls' teams. So that 13-year-old goalkeeper just walked away from the game. And we've got testimony from 35 sports like that. Mm-hmm. So it is very much impacting. And now, I suppose, the latest, conversation point has been parkrun. And the debate over the fact for the last 5 years, since 2019, when the rules changed to gender rather than sex, we've lost 20 records that are now held, women's records that are now held by males. And we've been trying to shout about this for 5 years. When parkrun eventually decided to remove the records, because that was what they got, eventually they decided they would do something, took 24 hours before it was all over every single news channel because it was affecting men. Yeah. And that's the position that we're in. When it affects men, things get done and it gets stopped, and fair play is the priority. When it affects women, it seems we're at the bottom of the pile. And that's what's so disheartening in 2024.
Yeah, and I mean, just to add to what you've said there, just genetically, when you mention all of these power sports, if I can call them that way, between the two, we have all of the information we need, don't we? With upper limb strength of 40 to 50% difference from males and females, lower limbs 20 to 40% as well, and 12 kilograms more skeletal muscle mass for men over women.
Yeah.
Why is it that people think they can argue against all of this? Why do they still think they can?
Yeah, well, they can't. That is the point, Mark. And there has been an awful lot of attempting at stopping debate. So we've worked our way through that now, and we are allowed to debate at last. But even now, every time we bring any research, any time there is a situation like the parkrun, the abuse that gets hurled at women who are literally just asking for what men get. That's all that they want, is the same equality to fair records and fair competition that males get. They're not asking for anything extra, they're just asking for the same. And the abuse that women get is extraordinary. I mean, Mara, who I know you've had on your show, I think, but done quite a lot on talkTV, has had so much abuse. And this is a woman who, is an absolute elite marathon runner that's competed for her country, and a very, very clever lady as a diplomat, that's lived abroad for many years. And all we're doing is presenting the evidence, nothing more. We're not making facts up. We're presenting the science. We're presenting the evidence. And it's just so disheartening, to say that parkrun doesn't have an element of competition is utterly ridiculous. Results up to fairly recently were actually used in British athletics on the power of 10, and athletic data that was able to be transferred from the times that was done at parkrun to official records on websites held by British athletics. And there are records and there are placings. If there's a placing, it's competitive in any shape or form. If we go this person's first and this person's last, that is competition. Yeah. Whether you try hard or no, the person who was first probably did. So to turn around and say it's not got an element of competition, in I'm so pro people doing sport. I've spent my whole life trying to encourage more people to do sport and be physically active. I wouldn't want anyone to be dissuaded from doing parkrun. All we're ever asking for is, can the records and the placings be fair for people that are biologically female? And in this day and age, that seems a ridiculous thing to actually have to ask for.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it, Sharron? Who really out there, apart from those sort of people that want to jump on the latest bandwagon just to stir things up without any knowledge or any idea, who really wants to have things like, again, you mentioned what's happened in parkrun. Again, the hand grip between a woman and a man in newtons, which is the way they measure this, it is so vastly different that anything to do with boxing and other where those fists are gripped are going to cause real damage if a man or a trans woman is allowed to take on another woman.
I know. I'm going to tell you about boxing, which is really, really shocking. So obviously a very explosive sport. And we are talking about pound for pound equal weight here, okay? We're not talking about, a big tall girl and a small guy or a smite. We're talking about people of equal weight and equal size. A male will hit 160% harder than a female onto a less dense bone structure. And this is a serious accident waiting to happen. Now, World Boxing have said we're not going to allow it. We're going to organise, transgender events, which is great because we do have to make space for everybody.
Of course.
But in places in America and Canada and Australia, they're still allowing this to actually happen, the same as they're allowing things like rugby to actually happen, even in schools, and we will see a very, very serious accident. Someone will have a life-changing accident or maybe even lose their life. So when boxing eventually decided that they were going to protect the female category, the reason that they did it was because men said, we will not box females in the male category. So if you turn around and say that transgender women, biological males, can go into the female category, you're going to have to allow transgender men, biological females, to go in the men's category, and we're likely to kill somebody, and then we'll be done for manslaughter. And because the men had a problem, it was stopped.
Yeah. And just even other things that, all these questions are out there. I was looking at some of the most asked before we came on the air. What scientific evidence, this was one that I really thought, exists regarding the physical advantages or disadvantage that transgender women may have in sports compared to cis, spelt C-I-S for those that don't know, cisgender women?
Well, just women, because we don't like the word cis.
I know.
We don't subset of women. We are just women. Transgender women are transgender women, and they are male, and they will always be male. And women are just women. so from that straight away that there's a bias on it. There's 18 studies, all peer-reviewed, that say that you cannot remove male puberty advantage. These are the studies that World Aquatics, World Track and Field have used. All right. So, and there's not a single study in the world that shows that you can mitigate male puberty or even male advantage. Remove the word puberty, just male advantage. So there's the science for you straight away. And also, we don't really need it, do we? We've got every single Olympic result ever in history to know that males and females are different. That's why we have categories in sport. That's why we don't allow 15-year-old boys to play with 12-year-old boys, because we know that it will be dangerous, but it's also unfair. So we have categories across all sorts of different things, whether that's age categories, sex categories, weight categories, or para categories in the Paralympics, to offer opportunity across society that we deem as fair. And to turn around and just go that I'm going to identify into the women's category. And again, what we see is that females who identify as males don't do that. They carry on and race with females, happily identifying as males if that's what they want to do. And no female has a problem with it, providing they're not on testosterone, which is illegal and against the rules. When World Aquatics put on an event in October of last year, because they said they wanted to obviously, make sure they were inclusive. Of course, everybody could have raced in their own sex category anyway. They were always inclusive. No one was ever banned, ever, from sport. They never will be.
No.
But when they put this event on in October in Berlin, not a single trans athlete turned up.
Yeah, I know.
So that tells you everything you need to know.
Exactly that.
They didn't want to be included. They wanted to race females because that's where they had the advantage. And of course, the Leah Thomas, debacle showed us exactly how big an advantage that was to go from over 1,000th in the world. So we often throw the figure 465 around because that was in college swimming. But actually, if you actually put all the times together in the world, Leah Thomas wasn't even in the top 1,000. And then they beat 3 American Olympic silver medalists at the National College Championship finals in the space of a year. That does not happen. People do not go from 1,000 to number 1, in a year at 6'4". It's just cheating. And there is no other word for it than cheating, right in everybody's vision.
So, for those that want to transition and want to be part of sport, if they want to do these things, why don't they understand that actually then taking on other people who want to do exactly the same with you is terrific for all of you?
Yeah, and we want everyone to do sport, whether this is creating new categories, whether this is creating new LGBTQ, groups or clubs or teams or even, their own Olympics or whatever they want to call it. But at the end of the day, the whole premise of sport is to make it fair. Otherwise, there is absolutely no point to it. And 51% of this world is biologically female. So I just don't understand how that huge part of the world, half of us, don't deserve the same as this half over here. And it's just misogynistic, really. There's no other word for it. And I have to say, I've been involved in elite sport now for 50 years. I'm 62 this year. And I competed for England when I was 11. And I have never seen so much misogyny as is around today. I mean, it's just so depressing. And I'm a mum of a daughter, and I'm now a grandmum of a granddaughter. And it really scares me where we're going forward at the moment with the protection for safe spaces, for equal opportunities. That there's a huge media reports today about males and females prisons, and how unsafe those females feel, and yet their voices are not being heard. We're not even being able to get a voice.